Hey, this is David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. I have a favor to ask before we get to today's conversation. We're doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. And even if you took it last year, we'd be grateful if you took it again, because we can't use last year's data. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long, we know, because we timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast swag, that great CityCast swag. citycast.fm/survey.
Today on CityCast, Portland longtime radio host and podcaster Luke Burbank is sharing his personal history in Portland through the lens of 4 songs. It's part of a series we're calling Portland Mixtapes. Luke has been the host of the syndicated variety show Live Wire Radio, which is taped live on stage here in Portland since 2004. He's also been a frequent panelist and guest host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and a TV correspondent for CBS News Sunday Morning. Recently, he launched his new podcast, Damp January, where he's re-examining his relationship with alcohol with the help of friends, family, and a few celebrities. Also, not too long ago, Luke and I were co-hosts on a 3-day drag show marathon, but we'll get into that later. It's Tuesday, January 28th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. I see that there's like a sound wave behind you.
That's something that a friend of mine sent me. It is the actual sound wave of a time that I got to interview Jeff Tweedy from Wilco on my radio show Live Wire. And like many white guys of a certain age, Wilco looms large in my mind. And I've always loved Jeff Tweedy, and we finally got him on Live Wire. And somebody who I know who knew what a big deal it was to me actually isolated the audio and then sent it to someone who makes a piece of art based on the wave file and turns it into that thing you see behind me.
That is so cool. I thought you were going to be like, oh, it's my child in the belly. You know what I mean? Like,
are you kidding me? Listen, she's got enough attention in her life. This is about Jeff Tweedy.
Oh my God. Well, the last time I think I saw you, was it over a year ago?
Whatever that drag fest was, I think was the last time that we were hanging out. And it was an interesting experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was like you, me, and an actress. We were essentially presenting drag performers, and it was a dragathon, and it was for the Guinness World Record, which was broken. We did it.
Yes.
Yay. You and I, Luke, specifically.
Yeah. Although this was the whole thing. I was thinking, okay, when the folks reached out to me and said, hey, would you want to be a part of this? I thought, sure, I'll probably be there day 3.5. It'll be 4 a.m. There will be like 3 drunk people in the audience.
Right.
This will be a low pressure situation. And then I realized that the 3 of us were going, I believe, right after Fred Armisen. And it was like some hugely famous people, which felt like way more pressure than I had been signing up for. We were at a very kind of prime part of the lineup. And our job was to fill, right? Like we were supposed to basically sort of soft shoe while the drag performers were getting their like next outfit together or whatever.
Yeah. And then specifically we were told not to go over a certain time because then everything would be invalid. Like they're just like, and if you talk for longer than 4 minutes, you ruin everything.
Right. None of this mattered.
Yeah.
I know.
Out you go.
I was really glad you were there because I thought you seemed pretty chill out there on stage. I think I went into my normal patter at these kinds of things or when I'm feeling cornered, which is to just start actively and aggressively self-deprecating. Just talking about how he's the worst person to be there presenting and how we were going to ruin it for everyone. That's my safe space. So I was glad you were there to bail me out.
Well, I feel like I just agreed with you. So it worked out for us.
Yeah.
No, I went into my, like, I'm at a party now, don't know what to do. So I'm like, does anybody want to arm wrestle?
Oh, yeah, right.
That's what I did.
think that was good, though. That actually filled some time. That was the right amount of time. Because, again, we didn't want to invalidate the entire thing.
Exactly. Well, we wanted you on to do a mixtape episode with us because we got the sense that you were also, in a bit of a reflective mood because of your new podcast,
Yes.
Damp January, which is all about reconsidering your personal relationship with alcohol along with your guests, which is such an interesting idea for a podcast. What brought you to that idea?
Well, along with the producers from Livewire, which is the radio show that I do, we had been talking for like a long time about trying to do a limited podcast series. And we just kept trying to think about a topic that was something that occupied a lot of our brain space, and particularly myself and our executive producer, Laura Haddon, and our editor and producer, Melanie Sevchenko. Like every time we would get together for a meeting, if it was at like a bar or a restaurant, one of us probably wouldn't be drinking, but then the other two would. It kept moving around. It was like we were all trying to figure out what our deal with alcohol sort of is. And it seemed like, well, why don't we, because of dry January is a big month for sobriety. And also just the discourse online right now is very much pro-sobriety, which is, I think, a good thing, generally speaking. But we just didn't think that was the kind of world that we were existing in. We were in something a little more damp, like a little more like, yeah, we don't know if this is great for us. We know we should probably do zero of it. In my case, I've tried to do zero of it a lot of different times without success. And so we just thought, well, let's try to talk to some people that we know who have different kinds of relationships with alcohol. Some of them drink a lot and are great with that. Some of them don't drink at all, including my mom, who's like the first guest on the show.
Nice.
And so we just thought, like, this is not about moralizing or trying to like tell people what they should do. It's just a kind of a survey of different folks and what their relationship looks like. And so it's been an interesting experience to put the show out, though, because the first thing that happened was I got so many people who reached out to me to congratulate me on finally getting sober, which is first of all, is not the case.
You're
and
like,
second of all,
not happening. Yeah.
It's probably some kind of indicator of something.
Everyone's like, oh my God, Luke,
They're like,
finally.
Oh, Luke,
we're so happy.
proud of you. And I was like, wait, what? Okay. You didn't read the fine print on this. It's not that I drink very infrequently now, thankfully, but just the outpouring of support about the misunderstanding around my sobriety was probably a good indicator that I did need to do this podcast.
That's really funny. But also context clues, people. Damp January, but whatever.
I mean, and also that's just not, damp is right there with moist. It's just not a great word. So that's another lesson learned.
Yeah.
Don't put damp in the name of your podcast.
Well, let's jump in. This is a series that we started where we invite people that we find interesting and that essentially give us 4 songs that represent different parts of their life with Portland. And you've lived in Portland, correct? Or have you always just hovered?
Well, no, I'm currently hovering in that I actually live in Southern Washington, but I'm in Portland constantly. And I have lived in Portland now for fairly long stretches of time. So I definitely have a lot of kind of sense memory around music that I was really getting into at different points of my time living in Portland.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, our producer has the clips lined up, but do you have a certain order that you wanted to take us into this audio story of your time in Portland?
Let's start with number 1 from the band Youth Lagoon, or the performer Trevor Powers, who performs as Youth Lagoon. A song called Rabbit is something that I suggested.
The devil's in the word of mouth when the cowboy learned to shout right before he threw me out. Face to the floor, and there ain't no magic door, just a bullet from the war in a 1984.
So, pretty much any music that's been released in the last 10 years, I learned about Youth Lagoon from my daughter, who is 30 and extremely plugged in to what is going on in music. And I have to say that even though we're going to be talking about Portland, that song you just heard is a little more rooted in my experience here in Southern Washington. I live like maybe 35 minutes north of Portland, kind of near a town called Kalama. Mostly known for the hotel that used to have the sign that said Elvis slept here, although they now tore that hotel down, quite sadly. But what happened was I'd gone through a divorce, and I was like living in apartments in Portland, and I really was keen on trying to re-enter the real estate market if I could. Also, I have these kinds of weird jobs, radio hosting and TV stuff, where it feels like at any minute I could lose all of them.
I 100% understand what you're saying.
So I was like, I really wanted to try to buy, if I could possibly buy a little piece of real estate. I wanted to do it while I still had like W-2 jobs,
Yeah.
like where I could get approved for a loan.
Yeah.
So I was living in Portland, but I kept looking at this little cottage that was listed on Redfin that was out here where I am in Southern Washington. And it was this old little 1930s house that was really funky, but it had a cool view of the Columbia River. And I would look at it on Redfin. Maybe I'd have a couple glasses of wine. And I would go look at this house. And then one day the price dropped by $100,000.
What?
And I was like, that's a sign. Now, most people would say that means there's something profoundly wrong with the house.
Yeah, you're like, so the foundation is damp, is what
exactly.
most
Speaking
people
of
would
damp,
think. Yeah.
the entire house is damp. But I drove up here and I looked at it. And of course, the day that I came here, it was like a kind of a weirdly nice early spring day, like one of those first days that feels like we're finally getting out of the big dark. And literally like a deer and its baby walked up this grassy hill up to the house. And I was like, oh man. So I ended up buying it, embarking on the project of fixing it up. And I don't know how to fix up houses, but luckily my dad does. My dad's a contractor.
Oh my God, you're so lucky.
Well, I do pay him,
Okay.
Claudia. And honestly, there was a period of time where he was charging me more than some other people who he charges, literally. And I was like, that is not acceptable, Dad. I will pay you because this is your job, but I will not pay you more than the Annensons are paying you.
Oh my God.
So for like the last 2 years, me and my dad have been up here working on this house day in and day out and getting to spend all this really, really great time together. My mom and dad live up in Silverdale, so they live like maybe 2 hours away, an hour and a half away. And it has been, I don't know if the house was a good idea. It was probably a terrible idea. But, oh, by the way, you know why the price dropped $100,000?
Yes, I would love to know.
The day that I finally like closed the paperwork, like there was no getting out of this. Like they had my money. This was a done deal. I heard on OPB that they had finally officially decided to not pursue this methane transfer or capture facility that was going to be on the Columbia, that was going to be in front of the house. It was going to be a $2 billion methane transfer point that was going to be so environmentally damaging that the fish were not going to be able to spawn in the Columbia River, and it was going to be a major, major danger. And I had no idea this was even in the offing. In other words, I could have woken up that morning and turned on OPB and they could have said, final approval has gone through for this methane thing. I think that like I unknowingly got $100,000 off because the people selling it were like, we got to get out ahead of this whole methane situation.
Oh, totally, totally. You lucked out, Luke. Luke, I think you're a little blessed, to be honest.
In this way, and you know, it turned out to maybe be in my favor. But all that is to say, I've been here with my dad. And when we first started working, I tore everything out of the entire house. There was like, it was just bare walls and one tiny room that had working heat and then a little tiny kitchen. So me and my dad would just sit in that little tiny room after work and we would watch British mystery shows that he would illegally pirate on his computer and make our little dinners. And I would play this Youth Lagoon record. And I also had a little like fire pit. I was like pulling so much wood and debris out of the house that whatever I could burn safely, I was trying to burn to keep my dump fees within reason. And so we'd either be in the house or we'd be sitting out by this trash heap that I'm burning. And I'd bring out my little Bluetooth speaker and I would play this Youth Lagoon record, which is Heaven is a Junkyard. And however bad things were in the house as far as the construction project goes, and however like dispiriting the whole thing was, I would have Youth Lagoon on. I would be hanging out with my pops. We'd have a fire going, and it would sort of feel like, okay, we got through today. It's going to be all right. So that song makes me feel very connected to this whole thing that I've been doing out here for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Wow. I just so you know, I commiserate. I wish I had one, a father, and two, that he was skilled.
Are you home improving as well? And
oh my God. Yeah. I just hire men that I hope don't kill me.
yes.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, the next 3 songs in Luke's Portland Mixtape.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass f- So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes. See details.
The next one we have, it's one of my personal favorites as well. It's MF Doom, Rap Snitch, Knishes. I freaking love this. I love the guitar part. I've been trying to learn that guitar part. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay, I want to actually, can we hear a little bit of it? And then I want to talk about the guitar part because it's how I even found out about the song.
Okay, sure.
Rap snitches, telling all their business. Sit in the court and be their own star witness. Do you see the perpetrator? Yeah, I'm right here. Fuck around, get the whole label sent up for years. Rap snitches, telling all their business. Sit in the court and be their own star witness. Do you see the perpetrator? Yeah, I'm right here. Fuck around, get the whole label sent up for years. Tight profile, low, like 8 and paid in full.
So this record is called Food, and every track on the record is either specifically about food or kind of a sidelong reference to, you know, some kind of food thing. But like, I'm quite embarrassed because I'm 48 years old and I have been hearing about MF Doom for, you know, the last 20 years. Then he passed away. And then, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I'm looking at TikTok and there's some band, you know, some kids at like Berkeley School of Music or something, and they're playing that guitar riff.
Mm-hmm. I've seen the same video. I totally know what you're talking about.
And I was like, what is this? Where's this guitar riff been my entire life? Anyway, it brought me to that song, Rap Snitches, and then it brought me to that whole album. So that album, Food, has been for the last, I want to say 2 to 3 years. It's been on my Spotify Wrapped as the album I listen to the most. Of all albums.
Every year, they're like, you are 1% for Food.
I mean, like, seriously, it's kind of like, it's one of those things that I put it on if I'm on a jog because it's very propulsive. I put it on if I'm walking through the airport. I have a different song for flights, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if I'm having a get-together, there are just so many different ways in which that album by MF Doom just totally works. Also, a thing that he does on the album that I just love so much is it pulls all of this audio from like old Saturday morning cartoons, but then puts beats underneath them. But I would say for me, probably when this really set in was when I was living in a part of Portland that's technically called Sullivan's Gulch.
I know Sullivan's Gulch.
I feel like it's a real micro neighborhood. It sure ain't Irvington, but it's kind of like on the same side of the 84 as Irvington. And I used to have this jog that I would do where I would leave my apartment and I would go run and I'd go up on Alameda and I would run around all these, you know, real bougie houses and stuff. And so now if I'm ever, and my girlfriend's brother actually lives in Irvington in this very beautiful neighborhood, but like my association with these grand, historic, beautiful Portland homes, my association with all of it is MF Doom now, because when I started running around in those neighborhoods, it was when I was particularly obsessed with this record.
Did you know that the guitar part is actually a sample?
Oh, yes.
Do you know what I'm talking? Have you heard that?
I have. It's a guy it's this like dude with crazy long hair. I think this is what I remember. This is my sense memory. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I looked him up and he was some like 70s dude, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's taken from his rendition of Space Oddity by David Bowie.
Oh, wait. I didn't know that part.
Yeah. He just like was free jazzing on it. His name is David Matthews.
David Matthews. Okay. And now wait, you are a guitar player of a competence level that you could conceivably play that lick?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's pretty dope, actually. I love that lick so much. That just like fills me with such kind of joy and slight badassery when I hear it. I think that's why I like listening to that record in particular when I'm walking through the airport, because it feels like I'm in some kind of like a cool music video or something, even though I'm just being in PDX. Which, by the way, can I give you my hot take on PDX?
Always, yes.
Okay, I'll start with the positive. I know this is a Portland podcast and we love Portland and PDX. I absolutely love those bleachers that they put in when you arrive and people are waiting for you. I think that's one of the smartest things I've ever seen. I will say that the walk has not gotten better.
Still long.
It's so far still. I think it's because they're kind of like halfway. My dream is that when they're done, things will be more connected and like sort of efficient. But we just went from like, there was basically, and I fly in and out of PDX almost every week. We just went from one giant inefficiency to just like a different giant inefficiency to where I'm trying to tell myself I'm just getting more steps. So, and I'm listening to my MF Doom, so I'm feeling cool while I'm doing it.
And you're probably looking really cool too. Because
I
that's
don't
what I
know about
assume. That's what I assume.
I honestly, I feel cool, and then also I'll catch my reflection in a mirror, and I'll realize that I'm not, as the kids say, I'm not giving. It's not giving cool guy the way that I think it is.
The harshest reality for me, thinking I look cool and wasn't at all giving that as well, was someone took a picture of me on my motorcycle, and I just thought, like, I'm on a motorcycle. I
Yeah.
look so awesome.
I would
Dude, I
assume.
look like, do you remember that picture of, like, Mary Poppins on, like, that weird bicycle with the
Yes.
big wheel?
A penny farthing?
Yeah, like, kind of just, like, her posture, like, was really erect. Do you know what I mean? Just, like,
Yeah.
head straight. That's what I look like. I did not look cool. I somehow made that motorcycle uncool.
Because you're supposed to be being like,
Yeah,
born
kinda
to be
hunching
wild. You're
and
like,
stuff. Yeah,
but you
yeah.
were like being very super I mean, honestly, good for you for having
You're
good
supposed
posture.
to.
If you want to, I'll tell you, if you really want to be humbled, if you're ever having too good of a day and you really just need to be brought back down to earth, check out your image in the self-checkout security camera.
Oh, yeah.
At like the Fred Meyer on Broadway. You will never recover from that, what that looks like. I feel like that's part of their anti-theft scheme, is to just lower your self-esteem so badly that you wouldn't even think to shoplift at that point. Because I mean, those things are really, really upsetting to look at. You're like, what?
Yeah. They're like, hey, you uggo, stop.
Yeah,
And you're like, I
exactly.
will. I'm too ugly to steal.
Exactly. Like I don't have the confidence right now to ring this broccoli in as non-organic, even though it is organic. That I feel like is the tax on the fact that we now all work at the grocery store.
Right?
Is we get organic stuff for the price of the regular stuff.
Next one. The next song that I have is Time Cop 1983 Summer Heat. So let's listen to it, and I want to hear, where this fits in.
Okay. So I got into this mode, I don't know, a few years ago, where I started mostly wanting to listen to music that sounds like a 1980s movie where a guy somehow enters a computer.
Yeah.
Like sort of like part Tron, part Blade Runner, kind of like real synth heavy retro futurism or something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this kid in France. Also, there was a period of time where I realized, Claudia, that all of the music I was listening to was being made by French people, whether it was the band Air, the band Phoenix, this Time Cop 1983 kid, Justice, the band Justice. I was just inadvertently listening to only music being created by French people. And this album just popped up. I don't even know how it came into my life, but I started listening to it around the time that I moved to Portland. And I think because I have weird listening patterns. I have Spotify, but I also have Apple Music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I listened to Time Cop 1983 for some reason in Apple Music. Like, that's just where I go for it. If not for that, I do think it might have given MF Doom a run for its money as far as the most listened to thing for the last 3 or 4 years of my life. I listened to this Time Cop 1983 record literally every single time I'm on an airplane taking off. Up until about 5 years ago, I would listen to Recovering the Satellites by Counting Crows, which I have absolutely a lot of shame in telling you. Full of shame about that. But I'm very ritualistic with my music. And so for a long time, I would always listen to Recovering the Satellites by Counting Crows. And then at some point, it switched to Time Cop 1983. And my ritual is, as the plane is taking off, I put this album on. And then as we begin our initial descent, I put Time Cop 1983 back on. So my image of Portland, and by the way, I don't think Portland gets enough credit for what a cool city it can be to fly into. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're coming from the East Coast and you just start cruising down the Columbia River, like through the gorge, it's just amazing. Or if you're taking off and you go out over Sauvie Island and kind of do a loop, or Forest Park, like, I really love the texture of Portland from the air. I just think there's so much cool, different kinds of landscape going on and different styles of architecture and everything. I'm so into it, but it's all infused with that music that you just played, Time Cop 1983, because that's what I'm always listening to. as I'm staring at Portland, either re-entering Portland or leaving Portland.
Do you do this because if not, the plane will crash?
It's not connected to a sense of personal safety. And I'll tell you something too, and I don't want to worry your listeners, but I don't know if it's just being 48 or stuff I'm dealing with in my life, but have you ever gotten to the point where you think when the plane hits some turbulence, you think, I've had a pretty good run. I'll take it.
No, not once.
That's kind of where it's also because I travel a lot every year. So maybe I'm just inured to it. But I literally think I'm also at a point in my life where I'm like, I'm not rooting for my life to be over, but it's like, if we flew into the side of a mountain and I was listening to Time Cop 1983, there are worse ways to go. When I was like maybe in my mid-20s, I started to get weird flight anxiety where there was just a couple times where I was on a plane and I just realized like I have no control over this. There's nothing I can do to fix this if things go sideways. And it started to really get to me. And so I went to my doctor and they gave me like Xanax or something, one of those things that chills you out. I've never taken much of that kind of stuff. I think I'm very sensitive to it. So an ex-wife of mine, we're flying to France and I got like a fistful of these Xannies. And we're in line at the TSA and I throw them down the hatch so that they'll just hit me right when we're taking off. And we get to the front of the line and the TSA looks at my passport and says, "Sir, this is expired by 1 day.
Oh, no.
You have to go home." And I was like, huh? I was completely zooted for 2 days. The next day I'm at the passport office trying to get them to do a rush renewal and I'm still out of my mind. So I don't know, maybe that cured me of all my flying anxiety because I haven't had it since then.
Oh my God. Okay, well, the next and last song that you had us queue up is John Prine, "That's the Way the World Goes Round."
Yes, off of the album Bruised Orange.
That's the way that the world goes round. You're up one day, the next you're down. It's a half an inch wider and you think you're gonna drown. That's the way that the world goes round. That's the way that the world goes round. That's the way that the world goes round.
I don't know if there are many other American songwriters that have the way with words that John Prine had. I've loved him for a long time, but I feel he's particularly connected to Portland for me because that song, "That's the Way the World Goes Round," is off of an album he did called Bruised Orange. And I actually got a tattoo
I want to see
in Portland from Juan Puente over at Atlas Tattoo of John Prine from the cover of the album Bruised Orange. I don't know if you can see that on the little camera there.
I can totally see it.
I had to wait a year for this guy, Juan, to have an opening so I could go in and get this tattoo of John Prine from the album Bruised Orange. The reason I got this tattoo, well, one, because I just love John Prine so much and I love his whole story, but "That's the Way the World Goes Round." It has a line in it, "That's the way the world goes round. You're up one day, the next you're down. It's a half an inch of water and you think you're going to drown. That's the way the world goes round." And I thought, I bet you a lot of the time when I think I'm going to drown, I bet you it's half an inch of water. I bet you it's not. It feels scary, but I bet you this is not as threatening as it feels. And so I've really tried to kind of keep that in my head when I am feeling anxious or when I'm feeling overwhelmed or oh my gosh, this might end me. And then I go, is it possible it's a half an inch of water? So this tattoo is to kind of remind me. Now, this guy, Juan, did an incredible job. But the thing about the tattoo was, I have some other tattoos, but they're kind of junky. They're I got them in my 20s. It's like a horseshoe on this arm. And this was the first legit tattoo where again, you get on a waiting list and then one day they're okay, I have some availability next week. So I go in and I'm you don't talk about price though. You just are getting the tattoo. And I was is this $2,000? Is this,
Jeez, yeah.
I don't know. I have all this cash in my pocket and I'm sitting there and the whole time he's just doing the tattoo. And I'm just I have no frame of reference for how expensive this is. Mm-hmm. Also, I can't actually see it because of where it was on my arm. So I'm just also trusting that he's got the picture from the Bruised Orange record. And again, he's come highly recommended. I've looked at all his work. I know he's good at what he's doing, but I can't really get eyes on it. And then finally he's kind of wipes it down and it looks exactly like the photo on the record. And I was okay, that's amazing. And then he was I don't know, how's $300?
What?
All right.
No.
Maybe it was $400. It was
oh my God.
I was okay. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't, if he would have said that's $5,000, I would have been like, that's the way the world goes around. I guess that's what tattoos cost, like at a high level. I mean, this person is an artist, very legitimately an artist. So.
Oh my God. Did you tip him though?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I believe me, I had plenty of cash on hand for this. So I was very happy with the entire process. I was happy with the outcome. Now, it is kind of funny because one of my jobs is I work on the TV show CBS Sunday Morning. And when I started out there 10 years ago or something, I didn't have this John Prine tattoo. The bosses, they're all like in New York. They're all a little, older. I don't think there's like a lot of tattoos going on back there for them. And it was kind of a thing like, well, can we have Luke wear a long sleeve shirt? And then over time, I just started rolling the sleeve up to like quarter sleeves because I have a tattoo there and stuff. And then eventually I'm just wearing T-shirts and things. And I just recently did this story about the singer Maggie Rogers. And there was a scene where she and I were on this stage that she was going to be playing on. And she was showing me this like trap door thing and stuff. And I woke up on the Monday morning after it aired and I had like 20 new emails in my inbox about the story. And I thought it was all people saying like, oh, what a great story. It was just dudes of a certain age asking me where I got my John Prine tattoo. So my only impact on the culture is that I'm probably the only CBS Sunday Morning correspondent with a giant ass John Prine tattoo on their arm that's now visible on television.
That is so cool.
Some people think it's Frank Zappa, but that's just because they're unfamiliar with. Can I just very quickly, and
of course,
obviously you guys cut this out, do whatever you need to do. The story of John Prine getting discovered is like one of my very favorite stories in the world. So here's the quick version. So when Roger Ebert, I think before there even was like a Siskel and Ebert, I think he was just the, the film critic for the Chicago Sun-Times. He was dispatched to go see a movie and I believe review it. And the movie was so bad that he left. Roger Ebert leaves the movie. This is in the 70s. And he goes and he sits down in this little bar that he likes to have a beer. And in the bar, there's a mailman who is playing at like a kind of an open mic thing. And that mailman is John Prine, a mailman from, somewhere in the greater Chicagoland area. And Roger Ebert is so taken with the music of John Prine, this mailman, that he writes his whole column the next day about John Prine instead of about the movie that he was supposed to review.
Oh my God. Taxi driver? It'd just be hilarious.
That would be so great if he walked out of like Citizen Kane.
He's like, but let me tell you about John Prine.
Yeah, exactly. Enough with this 2001, A Space Odyssey. But he ends up writing this whole thing instead about being about this mailman who's playing music at this bar, the like Pig and Whistle or something in Chicago, or the Iron Pig.
Oh my God. That's exactly where he would be discovered, at the Pig and Whistle.
Right. It had pig in the name. I know that much. And, that was the day and age when everybody read the paper and suddenly people started coming down to see this guy. And like Chris Christopherson started coming down and all these like big musicians started stopping by to see this mailman play. And things sort of took off for him after that. So that's the John Prine origin story. Who knows how much of that's true, but I choose to believe that it's all 100% true.
I mean, you told me, so I believe it now.
Good. And let's spread the word here on the show. Let's get it out there to folks in Portland.
That is exactly how that worked. Man, we've been wanting you on the show for a long time now, ever since actually I met you. And I was just like, he's delightful. Let's have him on the show. But I know you're very, very busy with, you seem to have like 4 to 5 jobs. And you seem to always be creating a new one for yourself.
It's all about quantity over quality. That's the thing. If you can just generate enough hours every week of content, they won't ask a lot of questions about, is it good content? That's really my approach to things. So I'm really excited to be on the show. And I've been a fan of the show and what you guys are doing here in Portland. Just as a person who works in radio and works in podcasting and thinks a lot about local media, I really love what you all are doing. I think it's such a cool idea. So I'm really glad to get to be a part of it.
Oh, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.